The brotherliness of Jesus. First, be reconciled to your brother. Matthew 5:24. We are trying to understand how Jesus was seen by the people of his time and what made him so fascinating. We have discovered that his joy and strength came from his unwavering trust in God. Now, I want to discuss another quality of Jesus that is difficult to name satisfactorily. If the word love wasn't so unclear and open to misinterpretation, I would say it was Jesus' love. If the word service wasn't worn out and lacking warmth, I would say it was Jesus' service. If pity didn't imply looking down on others, I would say it was Jesus' pity. If humanity wasn't vague, I would say it was Jesus' humanity. If kindness had more power, I would say it was Jesus' kindness. Perhaps the best word to describe it is brotherliness, which encompasses both a sense of kinship and a willingness to help others. This quality is what I want to focus on now. The impact of this trait in Jesus is evident not only in what his friends said about him, but also in the criticisms and mockery from his enemies. The scribes and Pharisees often taunted him as a friend of tax collectors and sinners. Even when he was dying on the cross, the leaders of the Jewish church jeered at him, saying, "He saved others, he cannot save himself." These accusations, though malicious, reveal how Jesus was perceived by the people of his time. Throughout his life, he made it his practice to help others, even those considered the lowest and most despised in society. This characteristic scandalized many respectable individuals at the time. His close friend beautifully captured this trait in the phrase, "He went about doing good." This phrase serves as a remarkable tribute to Jesus' actions. It demonstrates that he had a brotherly heart. Let's examine the accusation that Jesus was a friend of tax collectors and sinners, and understand its significance. The term publican may be unfamiliar to us, since there isn't an equivalent class of individuals in our society. In Palestine, publicans were tax collectors for the Roman government. They worked for wealthy capitalists and had to deliver a specific amount of money each year. Through extortion and dishonest practices, they could earn extra money for themselves. To devout Hebrews, these individuals were seen as traitors to their country. They were despised, hated, and scorned wherever they went. Their money was considered tainted and unacceptable in religious settings. Their oaths held no value, and they couldn't serve as witnesses in court. If someone made a promise to a publican under oath, it was not legally binding. They were subjected to public scorn and insulted by anyone who passed by. They were viewed as savage beasts in human form, outcasts, and worse than stray dogs on the streets. Decent people wanted nothing to do with them, and religious teachers ignored their existence. They were simply the lowest and most despised members of society. But even with these people, Jesus made friends. He not only spoke to them, but he also ate with them and visited their homes, which was quite audacious. It's one thing to give money to wicked people as if they were bears in a bear pit, but it's another thing to sit down and eat with them. It's one thing to talk down to bad people and give them advice, but it's quite different to associate with them. President Roosevelt wasn't criticized as long as he spoke to African Americans in the street, but when he sat down with one in the White House, the South became furious. However, Jesus sat down and ate with tax collectors, crossing a divide that no one else in his time was willing to cross. By doing this, he sacrificed his reputation. He made himself of no reputation, tearing apart his good name and disregarding it, all because he was determined to show brotherhood. Despite these men being so morally corrupt, he saw them as his brothers. They belonged to him, and he belonged to them. They were part of the human race, children of God's great family, and therefore, despite all they had done and who they were, he treated them as brothers. This conduct left a profound impression on the people of Jesus' time and has made such a deep impact on succeeding generations that it has blinded us to a fact that should never be forgotten. Jesus was the brother of everyone. Christianity is often seen as a religion that primarily cares about society's outcasts, the poor, the sick, and the morally corrupt. Many people only think of Jesus as the friend of poor, sick, and bad people, and they never consider him as the brother of the rich, the strong, and the good. It's important to remember that Jesus showed brotherhood towards both good and bad people, rich and poor, and respectable and disreputable men. He was the brother of every person. For example, when a wealthy man in Jericho climbed a tree to see Jesus, he immediately invited him to come down and have dinner together. On another occasion, towards the end of his life, while he was dining at a friend's house, a member of the household poured expensive ointment on his feet and head, demonstrating that the family was not poor at all. If the New Testament mentions poor people more than rich people, it's because Jesus was able to connect more with the poor. Rich people are always difficult to reach. In New York, you can enter the homes of the poor anywhere, but you are barred from the homes of the rich. Rich people always surround themselves with barriers and servants. Therefore, it's not surprising that in Palestine, this man from Galilee had to primarily interact with the poor. However, it should not be forgotten that Jesus showed just as much friendliness towards the rich Nicodemus as he did towards the poor woman at the well. He displayed the same brotherly interest towards the wealthy Zacchaeus as he did towards the beggar in Jerusalem. He also had brotherly concern for the respectable people of his time. If the New Testament gives the impression that he was more interested in outcasts and morally corrupt individuals, it's because his interest in them was so exceptional that it left a greater impact on those who wrote about his life. A large part of his work was actually done for respectable, good, and influential individuals of his time. The devout Hebrews in Palestine were bound by traditions and tied up with laws like an Egyptian mummy. Jesus dedicated himself to liberating them from these constraints. He tried to loosen the tight knots, but in his efforts to grant people freedom, he stirred up animosity and hatred, which ultimately led to his death. It was because he attempted to untie these knots that people seized him and shouted, "Crucify him!" Let us notice a few illustrations of his brotherliness. When John the Baptist was baptizing in the Jordan, Jesus came down from Galilee to be baptized. John, when he saw Jesus approaching, cried out, "Oh, no, I cannot baptize you. You are too good. There is reason why I should be baptized of you. This baptism is intended for sinners. I will not therefore baptize you." But Jesus would not listen to him. He insisted upon being baptized. He would identify himself with his brethren. "I want to be counted," he said, "a man among men." It was not a question whether he was good or not. It was a question of being brotherly. He refused to hold aloof from any movement that promised good to his country. He subjected himself to the same ceremony of which his fellow citizens were in need. He took his place at the very beginning of his ministry among his brethren. Nowhere does his brotherliness come out more clearly than in his treatment of the sick. He could not pass a sick man without his soul going out to help him. Pain in its every form appealed to him. Misery drew virtue from his heart. A large proportion of all the recorded miracles are miracles of healing. He could not look upon the deaf or dumb, the palsied, the blind, without putting forth his power to help them. No finer illustration of this brotherliness is afforded in the New Testament than that which the Apostle John gives in the story of the impotent man at Bethesda. Here was an invalid who for 38 years had lain in helplessness without a friend in all that great city. He needed only a lift in order to bring him within the reach of influences that were healing, but no one would lend a lifting hand. No other incident in the Bible throws such a strong light upon the inhumanity of the world 2,000 years ago. We are living in a day when the Spirit of Jesus has had a great effect on our society. We see outstretched hands and human hearts that are moved with sympathy towards the helpless and the sick. Jesus, by being brotherly, has set an example after which the life of the world is being patterned, and in every land through which his name has been carried, the hearts of men are gentler and their hands more eager to render help. His brotherliness is also manifested in his teaching. He could not look into men's faces without being pained by their confusion, their perplexity, and their misery. He could not see men passing on to the judgment day without telling them something about the great God in whose world they were living. Whenever he saw men fainting and scattered abroad like sheep having no shepherd, his heart was moved with compassion on them. When he looked into the tired faces of the Galilean peasants, his heart cried out, "Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." What a sob there is in the words, "O Jerusalem, Jerusalem!" There is in the words the moan of a brotherly heart. And not only was he brotherly himself, but to him brotherliness is the very essence of religion. Without brotherliness, there can be no religion that is pleasing unto God. The old law had said that one man must not kill another, but Jesus went far beyond the requirements of that law. He said that calling a man names was also wicked and would bring him into judgment. To use adjectives that pierce and cut, to refer to people in derogatory terms, to speak of men in ways that degrade them, that is wickedness and will bring the severest retribution. One of the greatest of his parables is the parable of the rich man and Lazarus. The rich man lives in luxury and feasts every day, and at his gate there lies a poor sick beggar, his body covered with ulcers, with no friend to bring relief. Only the dogs that prowl the streets lick the loathsome man's sores. Jesus says when that thing happens in this world, something happens in the next world. You can almost feel the heat of his indignant soul. You can hear him asking, "Do you suppose that inhumanity like that will go unpunished in the universe of God?" It was not because the rich man was dressed in fine clothes and didn't lack anything that later on he experienced torment. Abraham also was rich and lived comfortably, but Abraham went to heaven because he had a brother's heart. This rich man went to hell because his heart was not tender, his sympathy did not go out to a brother's need. And how did Palestine receive this brotherliness? It did not like it. Jesus was too brotherly. Men misunderstood him. They misinterpreted him, they maligned him, they laid their plans to kill him, but they could not make him anything else than brotherly. In spite of all their ugliness and vindictiveness, he went on helping them all he could, and when they laid their plots to kill him, he went bravely forward giving help, saying, "If I cannot help them with my life, I will help them with my death. By dying, I will convince them that I wanted to do them good. If I am lifted up, I will draw all men unto me. When hanging on the cross, they will understand me as they cannot understand me now. When they hear me praying for them with my dying breath, they will be convinced that I am indeed their brother."